Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm super excited about today's topic purely because it is so important to know this information if you want to ensure that your relationship remains healthy. Okay. And it's based on the book called His Needs, Her Needs, Building an Affair-Proof Marriage by Willard F. Harley. Let's just delve in.
Okay, yes. So we've all got needs, firstly, and the book basically goes through various emotional needs that each person has. But the most important thing is that the book first lays the foundation and the concept and theory of having a love bank. Now, everybody has a love bank, and they have and possess a love bank with everybody else in their life. So not just with the intimate relationships. So what a love bank in fact is basically when you do something favorable towards me or something that I like or admire, and you are depositing points, so to speak, into my love bank. And this is happening on a subconscious level. We're not really aware that this is what we're doing. So I see you very favorably and I see you in a positive light, right? Then if you do something that doesn't please me, let's say you're late to pick me up or something, or you cancel on me, you are then withdrawing points from the love bank. Okay, so I don't see you in a favorable light. Now you remember that you have this concept of a love bank with everybody else in your life, with people at work, with your boss. So everybody's doing this for you and you're doing it for them as well. Right? This is important to understand when we go into the emotional needs a little later. Right? So what then are the emotional needs? Firstly, we need to ask ourselves the question. And that question is, what is it that your partner can do for you in this relationship to make yourself happy? What can they do to make you happy? And the answer to that question would normally fall in one of possibly 10 categories. Now, we're not saying that's the only emotional needs that there is. There can be more, but most of the time it's going to fall into one of 10 categories.
And we're going to go through each one and explain it so that everybody understands. But why I'm super excited about this is because if you can understand your partner's emotional needs, and more importantly, understand the hierarchy of those needs, you know, what's most important, and you can talk to that and fulfill that for your partner, automatically you're giving each other what each other needs, but you're also consciously aware of it, which means you can make a conscious effort to fulfill those needs for your partner, which automatically is going to result in a healthy relationship.
True. And the other thing is, I don't think people must confuse this with the love languages. Because love language is pretty much fixed, and it's a way of just communicating love. This is actually a need that an individual has. And this, in my opinion, can change. Right. Also, we are also saying that some of the needs, and we'll explain it when we get there, you first need to see that you can provide yourself with that, you know, and not just put the total dependency onto your partner for that. Some of the needs you do need an individual outside of yourself to fulfill. But we'll explain that when we get there.
Okay, so let's just dive in.
Okay, so the idea is that you need to be able to identify your top 5 needs out of the 10. And these needs do not need to line up with each other. You just need to be aware of what that is for you and your partner. And the first one I would like to mention is, number 1 is the need of affection. Now, affection is basically you saying to your partner, when this is a need for someone, what you are saying to your partner is, and when you are providing this need to your partner, what you are saying is, I'm here for you. I can offer you security. You can feel secure in this relationship. You know, I am here to face and listen to the problems that you have. Now, how does one show affection? You can do it through hugging, holding hands, going for walks, flowers, maybe leaving a note, sending a WhatsApp message during the day. These are all forms of displaying affection. And some people find this very much as a security for them. So for your partner, this might be a need that is high on their list.
So when you say security, you mean if affection is high on my list and you are displaying that very regularly to me and giving me affection very regularly, then that says my partner is very much paying attention to me, and therefore I feel very secure in this relationship.
Yes, that they like my go-to person, that they'll be there for me. I know that they got my back. We're not talking about financial security here, okay? We're talking about this is my person, basically.
Okay.
And those are the things that for them will depict that. So it's affection. And sometimes, and we'll maybe speak about this soon, a little bit later, where many men confuse affection with sexual fulfillment. And we'll get to that now when we speak about that. But that's one of the needs, is basically requiring affection.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, sexual fulfillment.
I think a good place to start is how, for example, this is very different to affection and holding hands and cuddling and hugging and being there for each other. I think with sexual fulfillment, this is a need that predates your relationship. So you had this need before you even met each other. The thing now is, though, you've decided to get married. And with marriage comes an oath that we will be faithful towards each other. And through that oath, you are therefore then saying to the individual, if, for example, if they have a high sexual fulfillment need, that you are going to be the one that is going to exclusively fulfill that need for me. So, and that's the way it should be when you're married or when you're in a serious relationship. So the sexual fulfillment can therefore then only come from your partner or your spouse. No one else.
Okay, so what typically happens, right, is my partner has a high sex drive. Sexual fulfillment is high on his list, but he doesn't necessarily know what my emotional needs. And typically when in a relationship, one partner typically would have a high sexual need and the other will not, right? Because opposites attract. So what happens then is if your partner doesn't know what your needs are and your partner is not talking to those needs and fulfilling those needs, then the expectation still is to fulfill my needs because my need is sexual fulfillment. And a lot of the times, in a scenario where a woman, is a very emotional being, let's just say her emotional need is affection and it's not being met. And let's say the reason it's not being met is because she doesn't even know that that's top on her list. A man typically would know when, because he's always approaching her, he's always, wanting to get intimate. So it's very easy to identify when a man's most basic need is sexual fulfillment, right? So because he's not talking to her need, which is affection, so he's not showing her affection in other ways, she might not be able to verbally explain why she's not that keen to get intimate with him. But this is important to understand, because if you can understand why you actually feel this way, it's because your emotional needs are not being met. And a lot of men mistaken affection for sexual fulfillment. So, we're being intimate here, and I understand, of course, I'm being affectionate, whereas as your partner might, not, it's different, right? Maybe you just want to explain why it's so different.
If you're a man who's sexual fulfillment need is quite high, if you're a man, right? I think the thing you need to remember then, and your partner's sexual need is not that high, for her to be sexually intimate with you, she needs to feel emotionally connected to you. to share that part of her with you. And the way she becomes emotionally connected with you is also if you are fulfilling those other needs. Otherwise, it just becomes for her a physical thing. So that for me is the main difference if the man has a high sexual fulfillment desire and he is needing this from his wife.
So if I'm a guy with a high sexual need, I would advise that guy to listen to the rest of this podcast, because if you can identify your partner's needs and you can fulfill that, you can work towards having a really fulfilling sexual relationship and having your needs met.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
moving on. What's number 3?
Okay, the next one is intimate conversation. And this is basically conversing with your partner, intimate details with regards to your thoughts, your feelings, your plans of the future, things that you wouldn't normally share with anyone else. And that's what makes it intimate. So you are looking to your partner to fulfill this need and to be the one that you speak to. Again, it's almost like this is my go-to person. This is the person I want must listen to me and give me their thoughts on what I'm thinking. It's different from normal conversation where you're just talking about anything to anyone. This is about maybe your inner thoughts and inner feelings.
And so ideally you want, if your emotional need is intimate conversation, ideally you want that your partner fulfills that for you, right?
True.
But your partner could use the argument, but I'm not the talkative type. So tough. And I would say to the person with that mindset, be very, very careful, because what you are saying is, I'm not prepared to fulfill that need for you, which means then if that is a fundamental need within your partner, it's only natural to look for it somewhere else. And so this is one of the ways where affairs happen very often because of this, right? So if my need is intimate conversation, and you not giving it to me because you're not the talkative type, so to speak. So I'm not sharing with you. I don't feel like, when I talk, you're even attentive, you're not listening to me, you're not fulfilling that for me. And because that's so deep within me, I'm going to naturally seek that out. And let's say hypothetically, there's a colleague at work that just loves listening to me, right? So my intention is not to have a intimate relationship with this person, but this person happens to be talking to my fundamental need. And so the intention's not there, but before you know it, I'm waking up in the morning really excited to see my colleague at work, because we're going to have a really good chat. I'm going to get the opportunity to empty out. I'm going to feel fulfilled because my needs are being met. And before you know it, you end up having an affair. But an affair doesn't necessarily need to be physical.
No, not at all. So what you'd end up having up until that point then is an emotional affair, which is also regarded as infidelity.
Well, some people might disagree, but it actually is.
It is infidelity.
You're sharing so much of yourself with someone else that you're not doing with your partner.
Yeah, and normally when that starts to happen, you start keeping those conversations a secret from your partner, so they're not aware that it's happening. But the very fact that you're keeping that information silent from your partner indicates a form of infidelity. It's one form of infidelity.
So now that we know this, right, and you're in a relationship, you have the power to change this. You have the power to prevent this from happening. So you cannot come with the attitude of, especially if you've gone through the exercise, and we'll talk a bit later about how we actually identify each other's needs, right? But if you know that this is an important need for your partner and you choosing not to fulfill that, then you need to choose the circumstances that comes with it. And I'm not saying that your partner necessarily is going to have an affair, but your partner could end up talking to her mother or his sister-in-law, who now knows the deepest, best part of it that you're missing out on. And what a shame.
True. And what ends up happening is you might start being disappointed in her or him because they've now shared intimate details about your home life that you didn't necessarily want, but at the same time you didn't want to listen to them when this was an emotional need of theirs. Now, what we'll also find is that often men who'd be very talkative pre-marriage, but after marriage, they tend to subside and become more subdued in terms of intimate conversation. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think in the pre-marriage, right, while you're in the dating phase, I call it the honeymoon phase or the limerence phase, right? You're displaying the best part of yourself, but at the same time, women respond to what they hear. So you're going to talk to her, you're going to engage her, you're going to woo her and tell her exactly what she wants to hear because you're trying to gain her trust to eventually land her, so to speak, right? So you're going to do whatever you need to do. You're showing the best side of you. What typically happens then is when you get married, it's like your beliefs set in, and if your beliefs are but men don't share and, I'll just sort of suck everything up and just continue, and you sort of, and lots of men, sort of just retract, just go silent, just observe, just listen, which is sometimes annoying when your emotional need is intimate conversation, but you're not reciprocating it. Listening as well, it's okay, but eventually your partner will stop talking to you purely because it's not being reciprocated. But what I wanted to highlight there is then your beliefs set in and you stop talking. Your partner is very confused because that's not the person she got to know initially. And men do this quite often. And I think that's the reason for it.
Yeah, so basically you've got her now, and now there's nothing else left for you to, you've got the prize basically. But, they say that women are attracted by what they hear. Men are attracted by what they see. Therefore, men lie and women wear makeup.
True. And, lots of truth in that.
Okay, so there's a lot of truth in that, I guess. It sounds very funny, but there's a lot of truth in it. Okay, what's the next one? Recreational companionship. So with recreational companionship, it's basically two needs in one. Firstly, the need for recreational activity, and then secondly, the need for companionship. Okay.
So an example of that.
So, for example, in our case, going to run with me, learning to cycle so that you could cycle with, things like that, going on a hike together, or, where we're doing some sort of recreational activity and we're also spending that time together. So we have a common interest that we're sharing and we can talk about and things like that, so that's also what is regarded as an emotional need. It's a very common need for men to have. And you do find, though, that couples pre-marriage are doing everything the other one does. A woman might not necessarily be into rugby or soccer or Grand Prix racing or running or whatever the case may be, or cycling, but pre-marriage, she'll do all those things for him. And for a guy, again, he might not necessarily be interested in going to shopping malls. And going to shop with her or things like that. But pre-marriage, he does all of those things. For some reason, after marriage, that all dies down. And maybe it's for the same reason now, because I've got the prize and I don't need to do anything more to get it.
And what, just as you mentioned that, coming back to the love bank, many people also have this misconception that I'll get married and automatically my love bank is full. There's no work that needs to be done there. But what happens over time is if you're not depositing, if you're not talking and fulfilling talking to your partner's needs and fulfilling your partner's needs, that love bank is going to start depleting. And before you know it, you have a very empty marriage.
Yes, and that's the important thing. You're highlighting a very important thing here, because I think a lot of people believe, as you just highlighted, a lot of people believe that when they get married, marriage itself is going to possess all these things. There's going to be love in marriage. There's going to be connection in marriage. But the truth is, there's no love in marriage. Love is in people. People need to put love in marriage, which is basically meaning that people need to put love into your love bank, right? So if you put in more than you take out, great. But if you take out more than what you can put in, you're going to have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very, very important thing. And I think that these things, these needs, don't just naturally appear when you get married. It's things that you need to put into. If there's no connection within you, for example, there's not going to be any connection with your partner.
And so coming back to, we're dating, I was really interested in soccer and rugby and everything that you were interested in. And then we got married and I'm like, nah, sitting in front of the TV for 2 hours is not for me. I'd rather be doing something else, right? That happens. It typically happens.
Yes.
But if your emotional need is for recreational companionship, which means it's a need that needs to be fulfilled, then we need to, as a couple, sit down together and find common recreational activities that we both find interesting, that we can then adopt as something that we do together so that we are still fulfilling that need for one of us.
Yeah, so how you go about doing that is you make a list of things recreationally that you would like to do, like a really long list. Your partner makes a really long list. You come together and you see what the commonalities are, and those are the things that you choose.
Yeah, because then if, for example, you love watching soccer, you can do that with your buddies, but there is something else that we've identified, and let's say it's hiking, which we do every Saturday and Sunday, but that's our time together where we are spending time together, but we're also fulfilling that need of yours, which is recreational companionship.
True. And the other thing is, there's again the potential for an affair to occur here, because let's say you're not all of a sudden interested in hiking like you were before. And I don't, let's say, understand why that is, because you did it before we got married. And then you say, okay, so I'm going to go out there, join a hiking club. But in that hiking club, I find other females that's into hiking. So I immediately think, okay, so they like this. You're going to end up hiking together, doing things together, sharing information together. And there's a potential for an affair to happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the potential for it to happen is there. That's the reality of it.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And so just highlighting again the importance of identifying your partner's needs so that you can actually fulfill that for your partner. Okay. So what's the next one?
Honesty and openness.
Ooh, that's high on both our lists.
That's high on both our lists. But the thing is, I think everybody respects being open and honest. But when this is a need, it means that you want your partner to reflect what they think, you want them to say what they think about a situation, give you advice maybe, and really be brutally honest with where they stand, for example, especially as well as their feelings and their emotions. So, for example, if let's say I wanted to all of a sudden stop working or take a 3-4 month break from working and then maybe start a business, is for you maybe to say to me and give you honest thoughts about that. A lot of the time, what happens is maybe the other individual will say, you do what you want. But that's not really how they feel. A lot of people will hide behind, I'm being, for example, cooperative and supportive by telling you to do what you want. But at the same time, I do have fears about the decision you want to make.
Or I don't agree with it.
Or I don't agree with it. Or I don't necessarily think you're going about it the right way. You can do it, but maybe hold off for 6 months or so, or a year. So when you have open and honesty as a emotional need, that is what you're actually seeking, that type of conversation with your partner, where they genuinely share what their thoughts and feelings are about a particular situation.
And sometimes, your partner will say, oh, do whatever you want. I'm okay with it, right? And they genuinely are okay with it. Whatever you decide, whether you decide to go for it or not go for it, they're indifferent. But to just say that, especially when your partner's emotional needs are openness and honesty is to clarify why you're okay with it or why you're indifferent, because then your partner understands, okay, so these are the reasons why you're okay if it does go through or you go through with it, and these are the reasons that you're okay if you don't go through with it. But by sharing that or by not sharing that, what you're actually implying is like, I don't really care, do what you want. Whereas if you're explaining it, you're saying, I am interested, I am very supportive, but I'm indifferent in terms of what decision.
True. And it could also just relate to like they want to be aware of what your daily activities are, because I think it also gives them some kind of security if they know these things. Also, what details of what your future plans are. For example, you could say, I want to start studying some course. I would say, okay, it's fine, but you're not necessarily telling me why and what you want to do. Okay, so my advice is, for example, if you are the type of person to just say, because you could genuinely just be the type of person that is going to say, okay, do what you want, I don't mind, either or, then say why you feel that way. Don't just leave it at that, because someone with this type of need, if that's the response you're going to give, they won't necessarily think you're being open and honest with them.
Okay.
Correct. So the important thing is to highlight why you're saying so. Okay, if you do it, this is what I think. If you don't do it, this is also what I think. So they want your thoughts and your feelings especially. Okay, the next one is physical attractiveness.
Okay, so I was just going to jump in, right? Because that's important for me as an emotional need, that my partner maintains himself, that he makes an effort, right? I'm lucky because you just naturally do that. But there's some people in relationships where their partner makes no effort, but they sometimes not even aware that that's an emotional need for them. So they might, observe other men and the efforts they make, and your eye starts to wander. But if you can identify that, it's very important that you have the conversation with your partner and say, look, this is really important to me, that you really make an effort with your appearance, that you shave regularly, that you have a regular haircut, that you wear fragrance, things like that. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think the important thing with this one as well is if this is going to be a need for you from your partner, in other words, you're expecting your partner to maintain their look and look after themselves physically, in terms of maybe how they dress, their hygiene, keeping fit physically, etc. If that's going to be a need for you from your partner, then I think it's only fair that you need to be the same way. I think sometimes people have this need from their partner. They want their partner to look physically attractive, but they themselves allow themselves to go.
Which is so unfair, right?
Oh, it's very unfair, I think. Because
and especially after marriage, you just think you have the license to just let yourself go. But yet your emotional need, and it's not by choice, you have an emotional need that your partner looks really stunning and makes an effort. And depending on your personality type, you even want your partner to, walk in a room and just let everybody's attention just be focused on her. But when you walk in, you haven't maintained yourself. So that's not fair. And it's not... And so I understand what you're saying, and it's very important to highlight here because it applies to many of the other emotional needs, is that if you want it, then you need to walk the walk and talk the talk as well.
True. And the other thing with this, though, is I think some people might look at it as it being kind of shallow in a way, but I don't think it is. And I don't think you need to... If this is an emotional need for your partner, I think it's one of those ones where people might try and argue it in a sense that it's not important. You're concerned about how I look, and do you understand? But you're concerned maybe about what other people, those are the type of arguments they're going to use, what other people think of how I look. But I think it's important for your partner, then it's important how she sees you or how he sees you, because if you're not going to put that effort in, they're going to find other people to be physically attracted to.
And if you're making the effort and it's your partner's emotional need, the mere fact that you're making the effort says, I love you, I value you, and if this is important to you, then this is what I'm going to do, assuming it's not natural for you. Because most of the time when your partner's emotional need is physical attractiveness, that partner is typically making the effort herself or himself.
True. And I think this is why you see sometimes some guys start to dress differently. Because I think maybe it's the ladies' need, so sometimes a lot of the times the women are buying the clothes and telling the guy to dress like this, which is, for me, if you look at it now, it's a good thing. Sometimes somebody meets someone and they get married, or they dressed a certain way, but after they've met this person, they suddenly all dress differently. I'm talking about now when they're married, so it's probably a fulfilling and emotional need for the partner, which is fine.
And if it's coming from a good place,
Yeah.
what's wrong with it, right?
Yeah. Okay. The next one is financial support. So many people actually get married for financial support. And this is obviously where finances brings you security. I have a home, I have a roof over my head. I don't have to worry about money or things like that, etc., or where my next meal is going to come from. So this could be an emotional need for someone.
I think it's very important that if you identify this, and you typically would know this, if this is a need within yourself, and let's say hypothetically that you're not working, it's very important to have this conversation with your partner. So that you talk about finances, you talk about the expectation, you talk about the emotional need. And a lot of people compare, if I'm supporting you financially, then you need to do that I'm automatically superior, and that's not the case, because there's loads of other ways that you could fulfill your partner's needs that is not financial. But what I am highlighting here is to have the conversation around it so that your partner understands that this is really important to you. And we can admit that this does change over time. Because let's say I've decided to be a stay-at-home mom, and now our kids are a bit bigger, and I can actually pursue my photography dream of becoming a photographer, and I do in fact pursue it, and I'm brilliant at it, and I now have a source of income which maybe supersedes yours, and automatically then I am fulfilling that need.
No, I think I understand what you're saying. So you're saying basically both partners can go through fluctuating financial needs at any given point in time within their marriage.
Yeah.
So one moment you could need that as a main need, but the next moment you may not. I do think, though, for example, I think I need to highlight that I think a lot of men, I'm not saying all men, but a lot of men, if they are not necessarily the main breadwinner, so to speak, it might be a bit of a knock to their confidence, and it's not something that they will deal with in the best of ways. I'm talking with themselves internally. They're not necessarily going to share it. But I think a lot of men want to be the main breadwinner in the family. Because maybe it does come with some kind of authority. People, I think, in general, maybe feel that way.
Or it might just be, how they grew up, and that's kind of the typical norm for them.
Yeah.
And so they feel that they're not fulfilling that, which they basically witnessed throughout their childhood.
Yes, so what I'm saying is I don't think you should... I think you need to be aware that a lot of the times men, what their thinking process will be if they're not that, and how they will feel, because I do think there are situations where they could be reminded that they're not. But no man, well, not no man, but many men would not want to be in that position. Okay, even though sometimes circumstances means that they have to be. Okay, next one is domestic support.
Okay, so I'm just going to say that's high on my list. I didn't know this, by the way, just for the record. And again, it's highlighting the importance
so
of
when
actually...
you find out?
I found out when we as a couple did the exercise to identify each other's needs,
Okay.
then I discovered that domestic support is high on my list, and it kind of just made sense. Luckily for me, though, you naturally are the type of person that wants to contribute and will help. And we made an agreement long ago that, you know, if I need help from you or you need help from me, we're not going to sigh about it and make it an uncomfortable situation, but actually willingly do what the other is asking. So it's made our relationship, you know, a happy one. And I'm not saying purely because of this, but I'm just saying it's working, and that's why it doesn't have a negative impact on a relationship. But now that I understand that it's an important need for me, and the fact that I'm in a relationship with my partner that willingly does this and helps wherever he can, it makes a really big difference in our relationship. And I think that's important to highlight.
Yeah, I think, well, with domestic support, it might not necessarily be an issue at the start of your marriage. Newlyweds very easily help each other out. Like, what are we referring to in terms of domestic support? Like washing the dishes, helping with the cooking, you know, the cleaning, washing your clothes, ironing, those sort of things. And I think newlyweds can easily help each other out there. This changes often when there are kids on the scene, when the kids arrive. So then this need changes, or this need becomes more important.
Or you're in a relationship for a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or these other things that come up, for example, not necessarily just kids, but let's say you do decide, listen, I'm going to study part-time. Now you're finding yourself sitting in a class after work. Okay, so now somebody needs to still do the cooking. Okay, or am I going to sit and wait for you to finish your class, then you can start to cook? Things like that. So this need arises normally once a big change occurs within your home setup. It could be kids, it could be anything else. Okay, the one thing that I think needs to be highlighted is, because normally, based on people's culture and the tradition of how people's marriages are set up, normally it's the woman that has this type of need from a husband. I think one of the important things is for men to realize is that when the woman normally has this kind of need, a lot of the times their solution is to throw money at it. Right? Okay, so I'm not saying you mustn't get a domestic to help with the cleaning and things like that. But I think, remember, it's also an emotional thing. It's also an emotional thing in terms of what is he doing for me. So sometimes, yes, they do want you to see you helping around the house in terms of cleaning, because you're not going to have a domestic
all the time,
24/7, right? That's the one thing. When I also say throw money at it, sometimes a female will communicate this, that she needs help around the house, right? Some men take that as, I need to work harder and I need to earn more money, which is not the case in this situation. What she's saying is, it's one of those moments where the female is actually saying what she's meaning.
The moments.
Yes. And it's one of those moments where a lot of the guys actually get it wrong. Because they, you know, so they actually end up working harder and they end up giving them more money, thinking that that's going to fix the issue. But that's not necessarily the case. And the other point I think I need to make is, it's not also, I'm not talking about things that gets fixed around the house. Like, oh, my cupboard door came loose. That we're not referring to that being a form of domestic support. We're talking about day-to-day things that need to be done in the house, that we need a clean space. Fine, some days you have a domestic doing it. Other days, not. Who's going to do it then? You know, that's the important thing. Those are important things I think that need to be highlighted.
And if it's an emotional need, right, and you take the time to actually help with cooking or help tidying up after dinner, right, you saying to your partner, I love you, and I am showing you or displaying this love by talking to your emotional need and fulfilling that need for you. So it's so interesting because it happens all the time. I mean, we see it all the time in our practice as well, is that men's solution is, okay, I'll pay for the maid. Let's just get a maid. I'll pay for the maid and our problems will be solved. Or very, very, very more often than not, I'll work my butt off so that my wife doesn't need to work so hard. But that's it's so confusing for a man to do that and then realize, but that still hasn't solved the problem. And that's purely because you haven't displayed to your partner that I'm here for you and I'm going to fulfill that need for you.
Okay, so the next one is family commitment.
Okay,
so family commitment is not childcare. So we're not talking about, you need to change the nappy or you need to bath the kids. That's domestic support. Family commitment is more being involved in your child's development, in their moral upbringing, in developing them to become mature, successful adults, in spending time with them, in playing with them, So you're actually heavily involved in the development of the child from a moral perspective.
And if that's your partner's emotional need or one of the highest in terms of ranking, and you're not doing that, you'd rather throw money at it, or you just work harder so that you can hire an au pair or whatever the case might be to help and support your partner, resentment starts to build because you're not interested. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not interested. It just doesn't come naturally to you, so you'd rather look for alternatives. But what we're saying here is that could build resentment over time because your partner could feel that I'm basically a single parent here when it comes to actual parenting. And so what I'm highlighting here is, yes, you can use the excuse and find alternatives, but you also need to make the effort to want to change and actually fulfill that need for your partner, because it's for the benefit of your partner and your children. So that's one instance, right? The other instance is family, right? And I know, and so for the listeners out there, one of the highest needs for you is family commitment.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't grow up we're a close family, but I didn't need to see them all the time to feel fulfilled. Okay. And so identifying and learning this about you when we actually did the exercise as a couple was new to me, right?
Which is basically, if I can just highlight before you go on any further, this is slightly different to the family commitment that we just described now.
Yes.
Right? But it's still family commitment for me.
It's still family commitment, but it's not to do with kids here in this instance. It's to do with your family. And when I say your family, I mean your parents, your siblings, where I physically have witnessed you're on a natural high if you spend the afternoon or just even a few hours with your family. You're on a natural high that I can't... it's beautiful to see. But it's also something that I can't give you, And initially I thought, okay, why do you need to see your family? We're spending time together. We're going on a date. But until I understood it to that level, to understand, but this is a fundamental need within your makeup, I could easily then, happily go with you to go and visit your family because I know what it's giving you. And so once I understood it, I could change my mindset towards it. It doesn't come naturally for me because it's never been sort of how we grew up. I wouldn't say we're not close as a family, but it's not high on my list. So I don't need to see my family to feel fulfilled and emotionally, happy. I'm very much someone that can be alone and do things on my own. But understanding that for you, it kind of just put everything in perspective. And so when we do go to visit your family, my attitude is very much pleasant and very accommodating because I know that it's fulfilling a very important need for you. And I think that's important to highlight because a lot of couples struggle with I don't like your family. I don't need to spend time with your family. And I feel really sorry for people that have that attitude, because it isn't about your family. It is about fulfilling a need for your partner. And if your partner, it's really important to him or her that he sees his family regularly, then you need to change your attitude towards it and ask yourself, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to fulfill my partner's needs.
Cool.
And so I'll suck it up and I'll make the best of it, because when I don't, and I now, fight about it, and I'm uncomfortable and everybody can see I'm unhappy to be there and around my partner's family, it creates a very unpleasant environment firstly, and it's going to cause conflict between you and your partner, and it's something that can be avoided if you just change the way you saw it. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for my partner. My partner is important to me.
True.
And if you have that attitude, you will have less and less friction around that.
Yeah, and very good points you highlighted. I think the other thing I just want to highlight is that, some families are blended. So you have kids, your wife has kids, and I think it's important because it really depends also on the age of the kids. So I think it's important that you as husband and wife sit down and discuss what the boundaries are and what the involvement is in terms of their moral upbringing and your involvement in their upbringing, like disciplining them and things like that. Those type of boundaries need to be discussed upfront. And I think that's important because it's very much different dynamics if it's your own kids.
So partner A's emotional need is family commitment, which means partner A wants partner B to be really involved with her kids. I'm just saying in a blended family situation. Whereas partner B is like, no, I've got this. I don't need you involved. And then that is also okay, but it's communicated, which means the one knows exactly what's expected of the other.
Yeah, so that's important because I do realize we are also speaking to blended families and people that have been married before, so yeah, I think we can move on to the next one. Okay, and the next one is admiration. Okay. So this is an emotional need where someone wants to be, for example, complimented, valued, respected, appreciated. Right, so they're always looking for example, a kind word. They want you to notice good things that they've done. They also want you to speak to them in a kind way. Now, this is one of those needs where I feel you also, though, need to provide it to yourself. You need to be able to look and speak to yourself in a kind way. You need to appreciate the things that you have. You need to appreciate yourself, and you need to be able to not be too hard on yourself. This is one of those needs, I think. And for me, what I want to say is, with regards to that, is that it shouldn't come from a place of low self-worth. Like, I need my partner to admire me so that I can feel better. Because if they don't, then I still believe I'm not those things. And sometimes even if they do tell me, I don't believe I'm those things. Like, sometimes you can easily tell if somebody cannot take a compliment. You'll see it on their body language even. If you were to compliment somebody, for example, and people like, oh, thank you, what they're actually doing is they're pushing it away.
Or they don't say thank you. That's a very
Or they don't say thank you, yes. But sometimes people's body language and what they say is contradicting, So that really tells me that the individual doesn't really know how to accept the compliment. So what I'm saying with this type of need is you need to be able to speak to yourself kindly, appreciate the things that you do, know the value of the things that you do and that you bring to the relationship. And yes, then you can expect your partner to do the same. Then you can request of your partner to do the same.
So this is an emotional need, right? Which means I don't necessarily have a choice. I really need my partner to compliment me, to give me words of affirmation, to lift me up. But what you're saying is if I have low self-worth and I'm now expecting my partner to fulfill that all the time, that's not healthy. Because
Yes.
you need to be healthy as an individual, and this we talk about all the time, because you need to be healthy as an individual before you're in a relationship, and most people get into a relationship hoping the relationship fulfills them. And so that's just the fine line we need to talk about here, because we're saying it's an emotional need for me. I really need you to see me, see my worth, see my value, but not to a point where I'm exhausting you and need you to be my cheerleader, because that's kind of how I function. Then we're bordering on how unhealthy.
Yes, because then you're really suffering from low self-worth.
Which is something you can be addressed. Go see a coach.
Yeah, so it's this one. Yeah, I find this one is something you shouldn't, because what's going to happen is if you're coming from a position of low self-worth, the expectancy is going to be so much on the partner to give you that. Then the question is, when your partner's not there anymore, then who are you?
And at the same time, your partner could become really exhausted, and you might find your partner doesn't want to come home at night because it's this constant need. And that's extremely unhealthy. But if it is a need where you're in a healthy space and you need that from your partner, brilliant, because it's still a need. But what we're highlighting here is you need to be able to be in a healthy space or fulfill that for yourself before you can actually expect that from your partner.
Yes, because I don't want people to confuse the need to be validated with, I would like you to say nice things about me.
Yeah, or to me. Yeah,
or to me. You know,
absolutely.
There's a big difference. They sound very similar, but there's just such a massive gap between the two.
Okay.
And according to me, and I'm not sure, I don't think the book speaks about this, but it's just after reading the book, this is what I thought. Okay. In conclusion, from my side, what I think I wanted to highlight is, and what's come to mind for me is that there are so many different aspects. If you can choose your top 5, for example, if you just have a top 5 and your partner can fulfill that for you, you in good stand in your marriage and your relationship. Now, those are various aspects that needs to be fulfilled. From a cultural perspective and what I've been exposed to many times in dealing with various couples, what you find is that a lot of the time, especially within our culture, the men just look at their financial support as their main need to provide.
Yeah.
As they automatically assume that's their main need. There is...
Or they might assume it's your main need, so I'll just give you financial support and you should be okay. If you have an issue, I'm very confused as to what the issue is because I'm supporting you financially.
Yes. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of other needs that need to be fulfilled. It's not just financial. You can't go and tell your wife, I was listening, I'm not sure what it was now. Well, I'm not going to say. You can't just go and tell your wife, for example, if she needs emotional support, oh, go talk to someone else, or go talk to your mom, or go talk to your siblings, or things like that. I'm not the emotional type. You need to adjust to the situation. You need to provide her with those needs. Remember, you took her out of her home where she might have received all those needs. Right? Maybe from different people, but she still received it. So you can't just look at yourself as a financial provider or financial support, because that might not even be high on the list at all. You know?
What if you end up with someone that is very independent, financially independent, doesn't need you for that? Then you're kind of stuck if your only approach is to provide financially.
Yes.
And what we're saying here is, in this day and time, you cannot be rigid. You cannot bring your old ideas into new relationships. You need to adapt, use information. And this is why one of the reasons we really talk about this, because if you can get this right, I feel that you already have got a lot right within your relationship, because you are literally fulfilling basic emotional needs for each other.
Yes, so what I'm saying is, for example, a lot of men will look at themselves and think their only real need that they need to fulfill for their spouse is financial. But it's more than that. So the question is, if you are married, are you doing justice to that relationship through fulfilling your partner's needs?
And if you're not, then perhaps check out another of our videos where we actually will talk you through how you actually do the exercise based on the book, but how to do the exercise so that you can actually very quickly identify each other's most basic needs, at least the top 5, and really look at ways so that you can start fulfilling that for each other.